Before we begin, understand this: some prison doors only open once. If you follow stories where the system fails under pressure, stay with CrimeLens. The first alarm didn't sound like a breach. It was a dull metallic thud from C block to 17 a.m. The kind of noise correctional officers learn to ignore during overnight rounds. But by 19, the internal radio channel lit up with overlapping voices, and by 23, every housing unit inside Redwood State Correctional Facility was under emergency lockdown. I was the night shift lieutenant that week. When control called in the code, I was halfway through reviewing disciplinary logs in the administrative wing. "Possible perimeter compromise," the operator said. Her voice didn't waver, but she repeated the word possible twice. That's what caught my attention. Perimeter compromise isn't something you guess at. By the time I reached the control center, the outer motion sensors along the south fence had gone dark. Not triggered, not tripped, just offline. Inside C block, inmates were ordered face down. Officers cleared tire by tire. No obvious fights, no broken doors, no injured staff, but cell C-17 was open. The occupant was gone, 32 years old, serving 12 years for armed robbery and aggravated assault. 4 years into his sentence, no gang affiliation flagged, no recent disciplinary spikes, assigned to kitchen duty, level to security clearance. The cell door wasn't forced. The electronic log showed it had opened at 14 a.m. There was no scheduled movement. The control operator swore she hadn't activated it. The system didn't show a remote override. According to the internal records, the door opened through a manual command entered from Control Terminal B. The problem was simple. Terminal B had been physically locked in a cabinet since the previous software upgrade. It wasn't operational. I ordered an immediate head count, twice, by 2:41 a.m. It was confirmed. Only one inmate missing. That's when we found the uniform. Folded under Hale's bunk mattress was a maintenance jumpsuit standard issue for civilian contractors. Sewn patch on the chest. Mercer. Our Mercer had clocked out at 5:03 p.m. the previous afternoon. He had passed security screening, both entering and exiting the facility. No discrepancies, no flagged tools. And yet someone wearing his uniform had apparently walked through an electronically controlled cell door at 14 a.m. The warden arrived at 3:05. The perimeter search extended 3 miles beyond the outer fence. K9 units track sent from C block's emergency stairwell to the south maintenance corridor. The trail stopped near the decommissioned laundry annex, a building scheduled for demolition, but still connected to the internal utility tunnel system. The tunnel schematics hadn't been updated since 2008. When we pulled the archived blueprints, we found something none of us had considered. The old laundry annex connected to a storm drainage line that ran beneath the outer perimeter road before emptying into a wooded ravine beyond the property line. That drainage line had been sealed. At least, that's what the facilities audit from 3 years ago said. By sunrise, local news helicopters hovered overhead. The Department of Corrections issued a brief statement confirming an unauthorized absence. They avoided the word escape. Inside the facility, the mood shifted from urgency to something colder. We pulled Hale's file. No known escape attempts, no outside threats, no family members pushing for early release. He had declined parole eligibility review the year before. That detail stayed with me. Most inmates fight for parole hearings. Hale waived his. In his cell, investigators catalogued personal items, no obvious planning materials. Then we checked the internal messaging kiosk logs. At 1:58 a.m., 16 minutes before his cell door opened, Hale received an incoming message through the monitored system. The sender ID was Internal Maintenance Department routing code. The message read, "Shift change confirmed. Stand by. Maintenance staff do not send messages to inmates at 2 a.m. We pulled surveillance footage from the C block corridor. At 13 a.m., the camera flickered. not off, just a brief static distortion lasting 3 seconds. At 2:14 a.m., Hale's cell door opened. No one appeared in the corridor, no guard, no visible figure entering or exiting. The angle was imperfect, but if someone had walked him out, they were outside the camera's narrow field. We checked the stairwell camera next. At 2:16 a.m., a figure in a maintenance jumpsuit descended toward the lower level. Face partially obscured by a cap, no visible escort. The figure carried a standard issue toolbox. Facial recognition couldn't confirm identity. The footage was grainy, but height and build matched Hale, which raised the next question: who let him into the uniform? Maintenance lockers were stored in a secured room, allowing dual authentication, a keycard, and biometric fingerprint. Access logs showed that room had been opened at 6:40 p.m. the previous evening by Supervisor Dana Keller. Keller denied entering after her shift ended. Her biometric scan registered correctly, but she had been attending a union meeting across town at 6:40 p.m., documented by external security cameras and 20 witnesses. The biometric entries showed her fingerprint. We shut down Terminal B and brought in state cyber investigators. The door log entry at 2:14 a.m. was traced to a manual input command. The timestamp metadata didn't match the internal server clock. Someone with high-level system access had manipulated the logging sequence. By late afternoon, the story had escalated beyond an escape. Someone inside Redwood State Correctional Facility had coordinated it. The department launched an internal affairs investigation. Staff interviews began immediately, and that's when we discovered something else. Marcus Hale had never been assigned to kitchen duty. His files showed he had been on laundry detail for the last 6 months, the same decommissioned annex connected to the drainage tunnel. The kitchen assignment appeared only in the printed housing roster distributed to officers at the start of each shift. The digital master file listed laundry, the printed roster listed kitchen. To separate systems, to different job assignments. One of them had been altered. By evening, state police divers entered the storm drainage line. They confirmed the seal had been cut from the inside recently. Tool marks were fresh, clean. That required equipment inmates don't have access to. We prepared a public statement acknowledging an escape. Then Internal Affairs made a discovery that changed the trajectory of the entire investigation. At 1:52 a.m., 6 minutes before the maintenance message was sent to Hale, Terminal B, the supposedly inactive, locked terminal, registered a system-wide command from a remote network access point located in the administrative wing. And the logging credentials used weren't Marcus Hale's. They belonged to Warden Elaine Porter. Tomorrow, the interviews would begin at the top. By 8 a.m., the administrative wing felt more like a sealed courtroom than a prison. No one spoke above a murmur. Internal Affairs had locked down the server room overnight. State investigators from the Department of Corrections Special Operations Division set up in the conference room, across from Warden Elaine Porter's office. Every keystroke, badge swipe, and phone log from the last 30 days was being extracted. At 8:17 a.m., Porter walked in carrying her personnel file. She requested the interview be recorded. I sat in as the ranking shift officer. Porter remained composed, not defensive. She denied logging into Terminal B, authorizing maintenance messages, or altering inmate rosters. Confronted with the time-stamped credentials, she asked to see the raw metadata. Her first question: who had system admin privileges last week? 3 people did: the IT director, the deputy warden, and Porter herself. Then investigators noticed something alarming. The remote access command at 1:52 a.m., tied to Porter's credentials, had originated not from her office, but from conference room C, locked since 7 p.m. the previous evening. The access log showed no physical entry, but network activity had occurred. Either the lock was bypassed, or the system logs were manipulated. Outside, the perimeter search for Marcus Hale widened. Highway patrol flagged nearby toll cameras. Transportation authorities checked bus stations across 3 counties. No confirmed sightings. A financial analyst found a subtle clue. 3 weeks before the escape, Hale received $2,400 through 8 separate commissary deposits, all under $300, all from different senders, using newly created accounts funded with prepaid debit cards, purchased within 50 miles of the prison. All senders were real people. No criminal records. No known connection to Hale, but each had recently filed short-term maintenance contracts with Redwood State Correctional Facility. Electricians, plumbing inspectors, fire safety consultants. Contractors cycled constantly through the facility. Background checks screened identity and criminal history, not financial affiliations. Hale's laundry detail had placed him in the decommissioned annex 3 days a week, supervised by rotating contractors performing structural evaluations. These contractors had unsupervised access to the utility tunnel, and Hale had daily contact. By the second day, investigators weren't asking if it was an inside job, they were asking how far inside it went. The drainage seal had been cut cleanly with a rotary tool. Facility's inventory showed no missing equipment. The annex had been low priority for audits due to pending demolition. Bodycam footage confirmed policy violations. Hale appeared in intake footage carrying boxes with contractors. No officer supervision was visible. Staffing shortages had compounded the risk. 2 officers had called in sick the week before. Laundry annex supervision had been combined with tool room oversight, leaving intervals up to 15 minutes unsupervised. 15 minutes to move equipment, measure a pipe, plan. Cyber forensics revealed the 90-second timestamp discrepancy in Terminal B wasn't random, matched the offset between Redwood S server clock and an external time sync server disabled during a software update 6 weeks prior. Someone with system knowledge could manipulate login appearances to avoid overlap with duty rosters. A private tech firm had assisted with that update. One subcontractor was registered as Richard Mercer, the same name stitched on the maintenance jumpsuit found under Hale's mattress. But Mercer wasn't on the active roster. The ID badge scanned at the gates used a retired Nevada HVAC technician's identity. State police found a handheld radio in the drainage ravine correctional frequency. Serial number partially scratched, issued 3 years ago to Daniel Kessler, a former officer who resigned after an internal contraband investigation. He had since started a security consulting firm. Subpoenaed financial records linked Kessler to a prepaid debit card used in Hale's commissary deposits 2 weeks before the escape. Confronted, Kessler claimed coincidence and produced an alibi, speaking at a regional corrections conference in Boise until 11:40 p.m. Redwood is 4 hours away. Possible. Tight, but possible. Internal Affairs discovered that the remote command, using Porter S credentials, had come through an external VPN tied to a residential address 20 miles south of the prison. It belonged to Deputy Warden Michael Shaw. At 9:12 p.m., the night before the escape, Shaw had signed the memo confirming Hale's kitchen reassignment, the printed roster contradicting the digital file. Badge logs showed he left the facility at 12:07 a.m. Traffic cameras placed his vehicle near his residence at 12:46 a.m., returning toward the highway at 1:31 a.m. At 1:49 a.m., the external VPN connected to Redwood. 6 minutes later, Hale's cell door opened. Internal Affairs seized the workstation in Conference Room C. No forced entry, but beneath shredded agendas in the trash, a single latex glove contained a faint black smear industrial sealant, the same used on the drainage pipe 3 years earlier, now freshly cut from the inside. By the end of the second night, Deputy Warden Shaw was placed on administrative leave. Marcus Hale was still missing. Then state police intercepted a call from a prepaid cell phone in a neighboring county. The voice wasn't Hale's, it was Daniel Kessler's, and he said only one sentence before hanging up. It wasn't he supposed to go this way. By the third morning, the The story had outgrown the prison walls. Deputy Warden Michael Shaw was escorted out of Redwood State Correctional Facility just after sunrise. No handcuffs, no cameras inside the gate. By noon, his administrative leave was public, and state prosecutors confirmed a criminal inquiry into potential conspiracy. Marcus Hale was still unaccounted for. Daniel Kessler had stopped answering his phone. The break in the case came from something mundane: fuel. State police run automated license plate scans along highways radiating from the prison at 3:08 a.m. The night of the escape, a dark utility van passed a traffic camera 17 miles south of Redwood. The plate was partially obscured, but enhancement narrowed it to 3 vehicles. One belonged to a catering company, one to a church. The third was registered to Kessler Security Consulting. Gas station footage filled in the rest. At 3:41 a.m., that same van stopped at a 24-hour station off Route 6. The driver remained inside while the passenger stepped out to pump fuel. Hooded sweatshirt, baseball cap. The camera caught only the lower half of his face, but there was a detail impossible to ignore. A distinct scar running along the left jawline. Marcus Hale had that scar. It was documented in his intake medical file, a childhood accident. At 4:12 a.m., the van headed west. By 9 a.m., troopers located it abandoned behind a closed farm supply warehouse near the state line. Inside were 3 items: a contractor's maintenance jumpsuit, a handheld rotary cutting tool with industrial-grade blade residue, and a printed copy of Redwood's outdated utility tunnel schematic. Hale was not there. Kessler was not there. But investigators found something more telling in the cargo compartment. A folder labeled assessment findings. Inside were photographs not of structural weaknesses, but of personnel. Shift schedules, officer parking assignments. Internal audit memos highlighted references to staffing shortages and the disabled time sync server. This wasn't just an escape plan. It was a vulnerability study. By the end of the week, prosecutors filed charges: conspiracy to facilitate escape, unauthorized access to a correctional network, evidence tampering, official misconduct. Michael Shaw was arrested at his home. During the search, investigators recovered the laptop used to initiate the VPN connection at 1:49 a.m. Forensic analysis confirmed Redwood network credentials stored in the browser's encrypted keychain. More importantly, deleted chat logs were restored. The messages were between Shaw and a contact, saved only as DK. The exchange began 6 months earlier. It started as professional frustration. Budget cuts are going to get someone killed. Administration doesn't care until something breaks. Maybe something needs to break. At first, the language was ambiguous, then it sharpened. Discussions of demonstrating systemic failure, references to exposing vulnerabilities. One message from Shaw stood out: if it looks controlled, they'll call it sabotage. If it looks real, they'll call it reform. The prosecution's theory took shape. Kessler, resentful after his security proposal was rejected, approached Shaw, a deputy warden, vocal about underfunding and policy neglect. The idea, prosecutors argued, wasn't to free a violent criminal permanently. It was to stage an escape, expose flaws. Force emergency funding. Marcus Hale became the instrument. Recovered logs showed Hale was recruited through contractor intermediaries. He was promised limited exposure, a short disappearance, followed by a negotiated surrender that would spotlight systemic failures while containing additional charges. The commissary deposits were incentive, but something shifted. One deleted message from Kessler read, "He's asking what happens after." Shaw's response, "He comes back." We control the narrative, except they didn't. Cell tower data placed Kessler's prepaid device near the abandoned van until 5:02 a.m. After that, it went dark. At 11:47 a.m. the following day, a call was placed from another prepaid phone in a neighboring county. The call investigators intercepted. "It wasn't supposed to go this way," Kessler said. Authorities traced the phone to a roadside motel. Inside room 14, they found Kessler, alive, shaken, alone. He surrendered without resistance. In his statement, Kessler admitted coordinating tunnel access, the uniform, the time sync exploit. He admitted purchasing the prepaid debit cards and structuring the commissary deposits. But he denied losing control. According to Kessler, once they reached the van, Hale refused to return. He demanded more money, transport out of state. He said, if we wanted reform, Kessler told investigators, we'd have to live with the consequences. Kessler claimed he drove until sunrise trying to convince Hale to stick to the agreement. Near the state line, Hale forced him to pull over. There was an argument. Hale exited on a rural road and disappeared into tree cover. No weapon, no tracker, no further contact. Search teams combed the area 4 days. Dogs lost the scent at a creek crossing. Helicopters found nothing. Weeks later, Shaw's trial moved quickly. Digital forensics tied him directly to the network breach and roster manipulation. The latex glove found in conference room C carried his DNA. Financial records linked him to contractor payments. The prosecution framed it as reckless endangerment disguised as reform, staging an escape from a facility housing over 800 inmates. The judge agreed. Shaw received 8 years. Kessler, who cooperated, received 5. Neither admitted intending permanent escape. Marcus Hale was never located. Some investigators believe he drowned crossing the creek. Others think someone was waiting beyond the rendezvous. What remains uncontested is this: the escape exposed vulnerabilities exactly as Shaw predicted. Within a year, Redwood received emergency funding for system upgrades, staffing increases, and network modernization. The disabled server was replaced, contractor access protocols were rewritten. Utility tunnels were sealed. The reforms happened. But they came at the cost of public trust and the missing inmates, whose whereabouts remain unknown. I still think about the alarm at 19 a.m. A dull metallic thud. Nothing dramatic, just a sound we almost ignored. In corrections, failure rarely announces itself loudly. It builds quietly in shortcuts and rationalizations that feel justified in the moment. And sometimes, the people who claim to fix the system end up breaking it instead. Marcus Hale remains listed as an active fugitive, and somewhere in the archive, Redwood, his housing status is frozen at 2:14 a.m., cell door open. If you follow cases where the justice system collides with its own weaknesses, subscribe to CrimeLens. There are more files waiting to be opened.